Tranquility, we copy you on the ground.
New possibilities are opening up
lab.
Discovery, roger. Go for deploy.
And everybody in the shuttle program, the crew is go for launch.
Roger. Nice to be in orbit.
We have followed in their footsteps to get us where we are today.
You are looking live at Launch Complex 39A at NASA's Kennedy Space Center, where a SpaceX Falcon 9 and Crew Dragon Endeavour are poised and ready to launch early Friday morning. Good morning, and welcome to the Crew-8 NASA Social Panel. I'm NASA's Jasmine Hopkins, and we are counting down to launch 4 crew members to the International Space Station. Early Friday morning, NASA astronauts Michael Barratt, Matthew Dominick, and Jeanette Epps, along with Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Grebenkin, are set to lift off at 12:04 a.m. Eastern Time. And today we have a very exciting live studio audience in the room with us. This is the NASA Social. So this group is going to get an exclusive behind-the-scenes tour of Kennedy Space Center, as well as a chance to view launch and an opportunity to speak to some of NASA's experts. So without further ado, I'll introduce today's panel. Starting from my left, we have NASA Associate Administrator Jim Free, followed by Carla Koch, Mission Manager for the Commercial Crew Program here at NASA Kennedy. Jennifer Buchli, Chief Scientist for the International Space Station Program from NASA Johnson. Kristin, Deputy Chief Scientist for the Human Research Program at NASA Johnson. And Patrick O'Neill, Public Affairs and Outreach Lead for the ISS National Lab. Our panel will be taking questions from the audience here in the room and from those of you online using hashtag AskNASA. But before we get to those questions, we'll give each of them a moment to introduce themselves. So, Jim, we'll start with you.
Thanks, Jasmine. Good morning, everybody. What a great honor it is to be here with all of you who have taken such an interest in what we do at NASA around human spaceflight. And I really hope you do enjoy the day. I've seen some of the activities that you're going to see and experience today, and I really want to make sure you say the experience. And I'm going to start out with how many of you have seen a launch before? Okay, well, a lot of you. So you've seen one, so I'm guessing you took pictures or videos. Don't. Okay, don't. I think we post some pretty cool pictures and videos online, and experience it. Experiencing a launch for me is a great feeling. That feeling of the pressure waves hitting your chest, and in our case this time, the fact that we're sending 4 humans to space to really fulfill NASA's mission about exploring the unknown of air and space and innovating for the benefit of humanity, and really that inspiring the world side of things that you're going to experience today and what you see, and then what you see when we launch this incredible crew. I recently started my job, and I've had the pleasure of kind of picking my head up. I was in exploration before, and picking my head up and seeing what we do across the agency, and it's really phenomenal what we do. From our X-59, which we just unveiled, the sonic boom that we're trying to lessen from to a thump, from a boom to a thump, and to our Earth science that we do with our recent PACE launch, to what we're here really to do today. And frankly, we've done for 20 plus years, and that's put humans in low Earth orbit and maintain a human presence in low Earth orbit, which is historic, first in human history. And the 4 crew members that are going to go up on Crew-8, and Matt and Mike and Jeanette and Alexander, exemplify that human spirit and that international spirit that we have on this mission, and we had for Crew-7, even only 1 American on that launch. And those 4 individuals have been living in space with other Russian counterparts and another U.S. astronaut, Laurel O'Hara, really doing the science, the human research, and the commercial work that you're going to hear about from these panelists here today. I do want to say that our focus is safety. There's a lot of joy in what we do. There's a lot of inspiration in what we do, but we have to start with safety. And I think you're going to hear a little bit about that today, and I'm sure you're going to hear it in your tour. The administrator, the deputy administrator, and I encourage our teams who are on the ground to focus on getting our humans to orbit, keeping them safe in orbit, and bringing them home safely as well, which we'll be doing in Crew-7 in the near term. It is a really exciting time in human spaceflight. We have our Crew-8 that I just talked about. We have a Soyuz launch in March, the 21st of March, where Tracy Caldwell Dyson will be launching to the space station from Russia. And then after that, in April, we have our Boeing Starliner commercial crew mission, which will be the first flight of that vehicle. So as you can imagine, putting 7 folks in space, bringing 4 home, has a large safety component to it, even if we've flown all those vehicles before, and we haven't in the case of Boeing. So we'll maintain that safety focus, but we'll also maintain the excitement of what we do in space to further exploration, both in low Earth orbit and beyond. Let me turn over to Carla.
Thanks, Jim. Good morning, everyone. I'm Carla Koch. I'm one of the Commercial Crew Program Mission Managers, and I was actually Crew-6 Mission Manager. So we're mission management integration. I like to kind of compare that to herding cats sometimes, but I feel so lucky with what I get to do. I love my job. I get to work with so many people across the program, all of our system offices within Commercial Crew. So I get to work with our spacecraft office, launch vehicle, ground teams, integrated performance, all of our engineers, our flight ops directorate, space station program, and our commercial providers. So I specifically get to work with SpaceX mostly. And it's just a great time to be in space. It is so hard to imagine that we are, and really believe that we're on Crew-8. This is the 9th crewed flight that we've had. And I came in right after Demo 1, that first test flight, and it's just been kind of a whirlwind and just such a great journey. I'm so excited you guys get to experience this today and do the tour and watch the launch, and they're here with us. So I'm going to pass it on over and look forward to hearing questions.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Jennifer Buchli. I am the ISS Program Chief Scientist. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. I am responsible for the science strategy for the ISS program. I provide scientific recommendations to the program manager, to the research integration office, as well as headquarters, and ensure that we are utilizing ISS to its maximum capacity. I recently was working exploration science, so after about 2 years, I'm coming back to the ISS program, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you today at Kennedy Space Center. I look forward to talking about all the science that we're going to be able to do during Crew-8's time on orbit. Even though this is a crew-focused launch, we have about over 350 pounds of science and utilization launching just on this mission, in addition to the science we brought up on NG-20, as well as the SpaceX cargo mission we're going to be launching in March. So we have plenty of science to talk about. Thanks. Kristin?
Thank you. So I am Kristin Fabre. I am the Deputy Chief Scientist at the Human Research Program over at JSC, Johnson Space Center. I'm really excited about today, too, because this, agreeing with everybody else, this is a really exciting time. We have the Orion program set up. We're talking about Artemis. We're thinking about how we're using the moon to understand and to learn the impacts of space flight for exploration. So how do we even use the moon as we get to Mars? So what we do at the Human Research Program is we think a lot about these very unique spaceflight hazards that our crew will face for space exploration. So if we're thinking about galactic cosmic radiation or isolation, that distance from Earth, confinement, the environment around them. And so we really focus on the science, on the impacts of all of these changes to the human. So we focus on the crew health, and we focus on crew performance. We use a lot of our ground analogs, meaning things that mimic components of spaceflight, so we can learn these impacts of the human. And then we use these really important tools in this very unique environment on the International Space Station of how the impacts of microgravity affects the human and crew health and performance. And so we do a lot of science on what those changes are and how we can study these impacts on the human in space.
Awesome. Well, good morning. My name is Patrick O'Neill. I am the Public Affairs and Outreach Lead for the International Space Station National Laboratory. One of the questions I like to ask whenever I have the chance to engage with either a NASA social or other people that are coming out to experience a launch is, before you looked at your program and you saw that there was someone that was going to be talking from the ISS National Lab, who knew that the space station was designated a national laboratory? See, just a couple. All right. That's so. I guess that means that as a communication professional, I need to do a more effective job of talking about the value of doing R&D on the space station. But let me give you a little bit of background on why we have a national lab on the space station. So Congress in 2005, they were looking at some of the preliminary research that was happening on the orbiting laboratory, and they said, "Wow, that's a really cool place to do experimentation at it because you have exposure to this microgravity, space-based environment for a long duration period of time." But we're also looking at a lot of the science that's happening, and it's much more focused on NASA. It's focused on our astronauts living and working in space, understanding the human condition so that we can go to places beyond low Earth orbit one day. But what if we widen that aperture and allowed for researchers from large companies, from academia, from nonprofits, from even student experimentation, really opening up what is possible to do R&D in low Earth orbit? What types of things might we learn? Are there therapeutics that we can ultimately improve or enhance? Are there consumer products that could be developed in low Earth orbit? Is there commerce that could be derived in space? And so that's why they deemed the space station a national laboratory. My organization, the Center for the Advancement of Science in Space, has been managing the ISS National Laboratory for almost 13 years. I've been fortunate enough to be here for about 12 years. So it's been truly exciting to see how we've evolved in being able to bring research to the space station. And during that time frame, I would like to think that we have done exactly what it is that Congress intended. We have opened up the aperture as far as R&D is concerned. So Fortune 500 companies, innovative startups, academia, nonprofits, other government agencies like the NIH, the NSF, all of them are leveraging the space-based environment to bring value to life back here on Earth, as well as to develop a robust and sustainable economy in low Earth orbit. So really excited to be here. Again, the 8th commercial crew, wow, time flies. And it's great to go out there and have this new crew that's gonna have the ability to go to the space station. I'm excited to talk about some of the science and technology demonstrations they intend to support during their 6-month science expedition. But again, it's just great to be here with you all. Thank you for your interest in the space program and the International Space Station program.
All right, thank you so much to our panelists for those opening remarks. And now comes the fun part of the panel today, the question and answer. So for those of you in the room, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and we have some microphones, and we will get you one so that way you can ask your question. And for those of you online, please continue to use hashtag AskNASA to join the conversation. So we'll start right here in the corner of the front of the room.
Oh, you'll hold it. Hello, my name is Wade. I teach anatomy and physiology, so talking about the science. Are there any physiology-related experiments going up on Crew-8?
So we actually have a number of things that we're going to be looking at. One is looking at the changes of when you go from one gravity, so Earth's gravity, to microgravity, the impacts of your sensory motor system. And so thinking about motion sickness and how we need to think about addressing that research. So we're looking at some countermeasures because we know that space motion sickness can be a thing. We have to think about how does that happen when we go to Artemis, when we go back onto the lunar surface and Mars. So we're really focused a lot on sensory motor components, the vestibular components of the human body. We're also looking at the relationship of the immune system and its environmental surroundings on the space station. So we're doing some additional research on immune function, host pathogen engagement, on looking at potential disease models that we can learn from in microgravity on the immune system. We also have what we call CIPHER, which is this really large complement of studies, and it's designed to look at components of the body in space over a period of time. And so duration is a key element of this. And so how does the body as a whole interact or change in space and microgravity over time? We've learned a lot over the past 20 plus years about changes in the human body over a period of time, but we haven't really done it in an integrated, holistic human fashion. And so that's what CIPHER is doing for the study, or these researchers. And we actually have our 3rd crew member that's going to be signed up for CIPHER that's doing these studies on station. So we're really excited to get some more data from this individual.
Awesome, thank you so much, Kristin. Great question, great answer. We have some more here in the front.
Hello, to Jim Free. My name is Jay Castro. I live here in Florida. I take photography for a site in Brazil called Space Orbit. My question to you, the ISS will be no longer in service in a couple of years. How do you manage the partnership with the private companies after the ISS is finished? to send astronauts into space?
So right now we're working with our what we call our commercial low Earth orbit destinations program, where we've funded some studies to start the development to meet our requirements after ISS has met its end of life. And we have a number of those contracts with companies that are developing their business case to fly in low Earth orbit, some of which the business cases are built on what's done in the national lab today through the commercial partnerships there. And then we're defining our requirements of what we need for our astronauts and for our science. And you heard some of the health experiments that go on. We need those long duration times on station to understand, and in low Earth orbit, to understand what happens to the human body before we send folks on to the moon and Mars. So those early contracts under commercial low Earth orbit destinations will set up the companies to compete to provide services back to NASA and to commercial companies in the future after ISS is gone.
So the ISS will just burn into the atmosphere? How will this mental, how will you separate it?
So right now we're looking at a deorbit vehicle for the space station so that we can attach that and target where the space station re-enters to provide human safety here on Earth, much like we try and do when we deorbit spacecraft today. And that deorbit vehicle, hopefully, I think the proposals are due in March, and we'll make a selection, and the development of that will continue and go into orbit shortly before we anticipate the end of ISS. But that time between the end of ISS and when the commercial stations come on is very important to us. We, in the U.S. government policy, we're supposed to not have a gap in that time. I think it's the right thing to not have a gap in that time, but that's the contracts that we'll use. And I should have said at the beginning also, for all of you, I want to make sure you ask the questions you want. You all have paid your own way to be here. Not everyone that sits in those chairs does that, and we want to acknowledge the commitment that you have to the space program, in particular what the folks down the table here from me are doing. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Jim. Appreciate that. All right, we have another one right here in the front.
Hello, my name is Stephen Williams. You speak about the end of the life of the ISS. How long it's kind of a compound question, but how long does NASA expect to continue to support the ISS? And now there's more heavy launch capabilities and modules on the ISS reaching over 20 years old, does NASA or Roscosmos plan to design and swap out any modules to extend the life of the space station using heavy launch capabilities like Falcon Heavy or Vulcan?
So we've committed as an agency and with many of our international partners to ISS through 2030. Our confidence in that date comes from our analysis of how the vehicle is functioning in orbit, structurally, electrically. You've seen we've done upgrades recently on the solar arrays to increase our power capability, to keep the power capability that we need. We're constantly doing maintenance. The crew is always doing maintenance on the inside. We do our spacewalks to do maintenance on the outside, to change out hardware, whatever it might be. On our commercial resupply flights, we're sending up replacement hardware. We keep hardware in orbit in case there is a failure in the power system or the guidance. And we work closely with our international partners that have modules, our Russian partners that maintain their side of the space station, to continually assess the ability of the vehicle to perform and do what we need it to do, and most importantly, keep our crews safe. So that's what we have confidence in through 2030. It doesn't mean we've picked up our pens and don't look at it. Our engineering teams are constantly looking at the technical side of it, and we'll make the decision when it's right to deorbit it. But right now we've committed through 2030.
Thanks so much, Jim. I see some hands on that side of the room.
Hi, thank you for doing this. My name is Dario Hernandez from YouTube channel about exploration, space exploration. My question is for Jim. We have incredible crew to be launched in 2 days. So how is the selection process for each of them, or each of the crew missions that we have to the ISS?
So the selection process is handled in our Flight Operations Directorate at the Johnson Space Center. in coordination with the head of flight operations, who's Norm Knight, and our chief of the astronaut office, who's Joe Acaba. And we look at they look at the skills that are needed for a particular mission, and this goes for all our missions. The skills that we need for the mission to perform what we need. And a lot of those are driven by what capabilities our crews have to do the science on board, to do things for our human research program. And they evaluate those skills and what the skills are across the astronaut office, and that's how they assemble what crews go up.
Thanks so much, Jim. All right, so we do want to share some love with those who are sending in questions online as well. So we'll take one from Instagram now. Mac and Cheese 623, very fun handle there, says, what is the most challenging part of your job? And I think that can be taken by anyone on our panel. So if you all would like to take a turn saying what is the what is the most challenging part of your job?
Okay, I can kick this off. It's getting everybody to talk to each other, to be honest. We have so many people dedicated to safety, like Jim said, and making sure the vehicle is safe to fly, that being the Falcon rocket and the Dragon spacecraft, and making sure that everybody's doing what they need to do, and the reviews they need to do with engineering, and coming to consensus across the team of, hey, what's the actual risk? Going and assessing that risk. Are we looking at the weighing the right things to make sure everybody's ready to go? And so I think that just getting everybody to talk to each other is probably one of the toughest things to do, which you would think that'd be pretty simple. So,
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks. So I'll second that piece of it. A lot of times it's the integration part, right? We have so many different parts of NASA and groups working to make sure that a mission happens. It takes a lot of communication. I think for me personally, one of the most challenging things, and it's also one of the most rewarding, is making sure that we are able to get the science done that we need to accomplish. Our schedules are full. The crew is busy working on maintenance of the space station, right? Daily maintenance, sometimes doing repairs, sometimes doing upgrades. And then we also have a full schedule of research, both human research. We have the ISS National Lab, which opens up the International Space Station to the general public as a national asset, as well as the research we need to accomplish for our exploration programs. So I think it's a good problem to have, but as an example, the crew is so committed to science that coming up during the SpaceX 30 docked timeframe, they're working Saturdays. So we are really trying to get a lot done right now.
So I would first just like to say a big thank you to the ISS program and to everybody here that makes the science happen. As a science-based program, the human research program, this is incredibly important for us. And maybe to just third what everybody's saying about integration, that is very complex. And so the fact that we do have these integration operations that happen is maybe just a little short of a miracle, because there are so many moving parts, and all of the work that they do to make sure that our science gets done so that we get the answer that we need, so we can tell the crew that they're like, here's what the risks are, here's what we recommend, how do we reduce those risks, how do we come up with those countermeasures and mitigation strategies. Those are very complex activities that we have to do. We have to think about the type of science that we need to launch into the International Space Station. How do we make sure that the studies that we have will give us the answers? That's a lot of coordination and integration with our scientists, with our stakeholders across the agency. So those are Herculean efforts, but it happens. At the end of the day, we get the answers we need.
I would say my answer is probably going to be a little bit different because I am a communicator by nature, and I would say that as Jen alluded to, it's a good problem for us to have where we launch so much now from KSC and from other places around the world, where in some ways it's kind of difficult to be able to communicate to the general public about all the great things that are happening on the space station, in low Earth orbit, and beyond. So it's really incumbent upon not just people like myself, but also for you in the audience too, to try to do our part to communicate what's happening on the space station, why we're doing it, the value it brings to humanity, whether it be to benefit life on Earth or to further our footprint in low Earth orbit and beyond. So again, it's a very good problem to have when we're launching so much now that you have to be that much more spot on with how it is that you are presenting this to the general public. But again, I don't see this slowing down anytime soon. So again, thank you all for being here and again, communicating to your audiences about why we're doing these missions to the space station in the first place.
Thanks so much, Jim. Did you want to add anything? Or
No,
Okay.
they hit it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, we'll go back into the room now. I see somebody hand raised very high in the back there. We see you.
Thank you so much. I have so many questions, and there's no time. There's so much to do and learn. This is so exciting. Thank you so much for hosting this. So we're crossing over from Black History Month to Women's History Month, and we're in a leap year. So it's very exciting to be here for Crew-8. Gen Eds took years to make it to the International Space Station. Why do we need women and Black Americans in space? And by extension, why do we need Black Americans in space science? And a follow-up question to that is, if someone could speak to probably the doctor, how is human female health different than male health in space? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. I love that question. Diversity in general it gives us so much more depth to the science that we're studying. When you have different walks of life, different perspectives, different experiences, you come to the table with a different way of solving a problem. You come to the table with a new idea or a different idea. Somebody like me will probably think differently than you. And that actually makes the science stronger. That gives us a better understanding that we need to understand the impacts of the human body in space as a whole and not just one particular demographic. We really want to think about spaces for everyone. I know that we say this a lot. I've heard a lot of our colleagues, whether at National Lab or some of our partners in the commercial crew health office or even just the commercial partners, that really space is for everyone. We need to understand the impacts, the changes that are happening, not just in the different demographics, but when we talk about sex differences, what does that mean? What does the hormone response do to physiology? What do we think about when it comes to radiation? We actually do have some studies looking at sex differences in our portfolio where we're looking at some radiation studies. We're looking at some behavioral studies where we can understand the impact of not just the genetic component of sex differences, but also the hormonal component of sex differences. And these are all going to be key answers for us as we start to inform our hopefully increasingly diverse crew that are going to be going to the moon, going to Mars, on how we can best inform them of the best way they can have the most optimal experience for their mission.
By the way, my name is Ginger Birkenbiel, and I'm here with Burke Creative, my company, and CPAS Foundation, a STEM organization in Chicago. So just one more question about women in space. And this is a really blunt scientific question, do women have their normal, natural experiences in space that we have on Earth? For example, menstrual cycles. Can women in space, have you ever had a woman in space that's been pregnant? I don't know. I mean, these are just questions that I'm curious about because a lot of the science is based on male anatomy. I don't know how much information we have about women, and I don't know how many women have been launched into space. So how new is the science, or, how much more are we doing to learn about women in space?
So I would say that there's no limiting factors for being a woman in space, that they work with their flight docs on whatever is best for them, however that is. And that is a conversation between the patient and the flight doc. Whatever they want to do, however they want to do it, that's how they can handle it. So there's no limitations for being a woman going into space exploration or doing research or living and thriving in space. We are rock stars at the type of science we do. We have so many great examples, so many wonderful crew that have represented our science and represented our diverse backgrounds that come back and share their experience and inspire the next generation of an even more diverse population, both men and women and ethnic backgrounds, to join the NASA workforce and to continue our journey.
All right, thank you so much, Kristin, for taking those questions, and thank you for asking them as well. So we have a lot more now on this side of the room again, so we'll go back here.
Hi, my name is Krista. So I primarily share content on Instagram, and one of the things I talk about a lot is mental health. So I know you guys or that a lot of experiments are run on the physical impacts of being in space, but I'm wondering if there's anything that is being tested or learned about the mental health side of what I imagine space exploration is.
Sure. I could take a start, and then if anybody else wants to add their perspective, because I know that you probably see a lot of research that comes out of just even basic science as well. But we focus a lot on mental health. It's actually one of the main hazards that we think about for space exploration. If we think about isolation and confinement, or even the distance from Earth, so thinking about comm delays, what does that do? Not being able to speak to your family whenever you want to, as we're thinking about our way to Mars. So we have a whole section that's I guess we call it an element, which is basically focusing on a discipline for that type of question. So behavioral health, cognitive function, human factors, and so how does the person impact or interface with the machinery within the vehicle? What does sleep do to stress, and what does that do to team dynamics? How does food and exercise create a healthy countermeasure so that it keeps it helps with some of the behavioral stress that you might impact or you might be experienced to. So we have a whole team dedicated to behavioral health that help with our surveys. They help with actually a lot of the research that we're doing with CIPHER or standard measures. These data points that we're collecting on flight studies and our ground analogs are really helping us get insight into the behavioral component of isolation and confinement and distance from Earth. And then we can start coming up with how do we reduce those risks? How can we recommend some of our mitigation strategies to the agency?
Kristin, could I add to that with an example that I love that you're doing in the program is our CHAPIA, which I'm never going to get the acronym right, but it's a Mars analog on Earth where have 4 subjects in a Mars base station at the Johnson Space Center today, where we're doing a lot of things that Kristin just talked about, understanding the effect of those 4 people together on the surface of Mars. They can go out and do simulated spacewalks. They've been given their food when they were put in, the food for the year, how the caloric intake helps with some of the interfaces that Kristin was just talking about, how the caloric intake drives their energy level. There's a lot of feedback on the mental side of that, and I think we have 4 of those scheduled, if I'm right. 4 one-year sessions with 4 different crew to really understand what are they going to need while we start to design these vehicles to send them to Mars down to the surface and back.
Awesome. I'll just add, this is something we don't just think about from the research perspective as well, right? We think about this operationally. So Kristin touched on it a little bit. You know, we do have the team of researchers who are looking at this for future exploration. We also have a robust team of doctors in flight medicine and behavioral experts and support for our crew members. So this is something that if we're seeing things to help the crew function better, perform better, support them while they're on orbit, our researchers are working hand in hand with those teams to make sure that we're implementing that.
Thank you all for tag teaming that question. We have another one here in the front of this side of the room.
Hi, I'm Chris. I teach photography on YouTube, so this is a photography and ISS question. Obviously, there's a lot of training that's done before these missions, safety and engineering and science and all that. But one of the most powerful things, I think, to come out of these missions are the photographs, because I think it touches the public in a real profound way. What type of training, or is there any training, is done before they go up to the ISS in photography and using cameras and knowing what to shoot? Is there any training that's done?
There is. Thank you for the question. There is an entire group that trains photography. We have folks who train the crew members, and then we also have people who support real-time, help kind of troubleshoot, timeline things on orbit. The crew does get training on photography, how to use the cameras, right? A big part of this, even for research, is documenting what we're doing, right? Sometimes that is the data. And then, as you mentioned too, there's the public outreach piece of it. ISS has a really unique vantage point, not only from where we're flying, right, but we cover 90% of the Earth's inhabited surfaces. So there's a lot we can see from ISS. So one of the things that the crew is trained to do not only is to look at specific targets or collect data, but also we participate in the International Disasters Network too. So a lot of times when there are events going around around the world, natural disasters, our crew members can really get involved and help see things from a perspective that you couldn't otherwise.
Thank you so much. All right, we do have another question here from social media. Clark on YouTube and Christopher Mick on Facebook ask, are there any updates on the new EVA suits, and when will the next-gen spacesuits go up for testing?
So EVA suits, we have two contracts in place to get EVA as a service. One contract with Collins for the space station suits, and one contract with Axiom for our exploration suits. Those developments are phased a little bit differently. The ISS suits are a little bit later than the exploration suits. The Axiom suits actually just had a recent run in the neutral buoyancy lab at the Johnson Space Center. So that's testing the entire suit, the payload life support system. That is a really complex side of things, as we've learned in our EVA history, is underway, using actually a lot of the technologies that we transferred out into industry, we being NASA, transferred out into industry. So the development, PDR, the preliminary design review, I think was completed late last year, and they're moving into the critical design review, which is where you really focus the design, finalize it, and then start building the flight hardware. But we're testing parts of the suits and components of the suits today.
Awesome, thank you so much. So now we want to come back into the room. We have some right here in the center aisle.
Hi, good morning. My name is Arjit Tipernani. I'm actually a fourth-year dental student at the University of Florida, go Gators, but I have a passion for space. Space is hard, and sometimes geopolitical tensions can make it even harder. How is NASA maintaining its relationship with the Russian Space Agency, and how are you keeping that partnership successful?
I'll start, and any of you that have some of the practical side of what happens on your disciplines on station, I'd be happy for you to share. I mean, it obviously is a challenging time on Earth with those relationships. I think what space has proven time and time and again is that it is, I'll say, politically influence neutral. It's about professional space flight. It's about safety. It's about commitment to getting science done and continuing to explore together. And that is the umbrella under which we've continued to operate. Space is soft power, so to speak, but we've kept that professional relationship with our Russian colleagues and have continued the dialogue. We're obviously launching crew members from both sides. We have Alexander launching on Crew-8, and we have Tracy launching on Soyuz in March. So I think that's the way we've operated. That's the way we've agreed to continue to operate, and keep the politics out of it so that we maintain our safety and our exploration focus.
Thanks, Jen. Does anybody else want to add to that question?
I can add to it from the science perspective. Since the beginning of ISS, we've been working very closely with our partners to collaborate on science. As you said, space is hard. None of us can do this alone. And so we come together a lot of times to design experiments and address questions in a collaborative way. So someone will contribute crew time, another person will contribute hardware, we'll share the data. So we have a long history of doing that with all of our international partners, including our Russian partners. So during this time, that is continuing. We, in particular, are collaborating on physical sciences at the moment with our physical science department, but we have a history of also doing that on the human research side.
Yeah, and just really nothing more to add other than we try to just keep things professional and business as usual until somebody tells us not to. We're just going to keep doing the science that we need to do.
Great, thank you guys so much for taking that question. So you guys have a full agenda today, and that is going to wrap up all the questions we can take here in the room at the time. But before you go, we do have some things to leave you with. We want to thank our live studio audience, or the NASA social crew, for joining us. We want to thank our panelists for answering those questions as well. If you're a content creator who's watching this and wants to get involved, you can do that using nasa.gov/social to see what opportunities are coming up next. Also, leading up to launch this Friday morning, you can use hashtag Crew-8 across our NASA social platforms to get involved in the conversation. And as a reminder, that launch coverage on NASA TV is scheduled to begin at 8 p.m. Eastern Thursday night on February 29th, and launch is scheduled for 12:04, very early, a.m. Eastern on March 1st. Thank you again so much for joining us today, and until next time, go NASA, go SpaceX, and go Crew-8.